I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. What is up, everyone? I am so excited. This comes out on Sunday, and this coming Thursday, I will be interviewing Cheryl Cicchetti. She's the owner of Sequoia Productions. Why does that matter, you might ask? She is behind the scenes. She's the former planner for a lot of these Oscar events and Emmy events and all these incredible award shows down in LA, and I'll be with her on the main stage. So I'm really excited about that. It's part of the Northwest Event Show, one of the largest event trade shows happening here in the region. That'll be at the Convention Center. And then after I interview her in the morning, that's going to be March 27th from 9 to 10 a.m. Please get a ticket. Come see me. Then I will be at an exhibit space as part of the Get Happy Pavilion in the trade show. I'm going to be doing some fake podcast interviewing for some of the attendees, kind of showing you can have a live podcast at your event, and this is some of the things you can do at your event and involving me. And then later that day, I'm moderating a panel with former podcast guest Ambika Singh with Armoire. We're doing an event with Elevate and Armoire, so that'll be that night at 5:30. And if you think that sounds like a lot for me to do in a day, it is, and I will be drinking a lot of coffee, so check those things out. That's it for me. I'm going to introduce my guest here. It's Craig Dawson, president of Retail Lockbox. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for hosting me in your, would you call it a warehouse or more office?
Office, but we've made it an urban office.
An urban office, yeah. We're in Central District, would you call it? Yeah. It's nice to be out here. And if you hear a little background noise, it's because they're printing checks and things back there, right?
Processing payments. Processing payments.
I love it. So give us a little bit of kind of an elevator pitch about what Retail Lockbox does and maybe also kind of the size of it. How many people do you serve?
Sure. So Retail Lockbox, we're a payment processing company. Check processing, credit cards, online payments. So when you're making your 9 to 11 payments that you make a month for your utility bill, for your newspaper, for your car, your Visa bill, we actually process those for corporations, municipalities, nonprofit. So we actually process about 2 million check payments per month. We have machines that open mail at about 10,000 pieces an hour.
Whoa.
We have other machines that are where we have an operator that sits at that machine and they process about 1,000 pieces an hour.
Wow.
So we'll process, again, like I said, about 2 million payments a month. When we process those payments, we deposit the money into our client's bank account. We capture information on a coupon, if you will, on a paper-based coupon that you would get when you tear off your invoice for whatever you're buying for your utility again. And then we capture the information, we take a digital picture of it, we deposit the money in the bank, and then we send our clients an electronic file basically telling them who paid how much so they can actually post to their accounts receivable systems.
Wow.
And then we again deposit the money in their bank, and we probably have on a daily basis probably 25 courier runs that go either to the post office here in Seattle or one of the other 31 post offices that we collect from across the country.
Wow, that is a lot. I feel like a lot of people don't understand or know that there is a payment processing in between the person paying the company or they just think that I'm paying City of Seattle directly. I'm thinking about it because I had to pay 3 parking tickets yesterday, and I was like, oh man, it makes me think about Craig. Yeah, so that is incredible. And a little bit about you in particular. You co-founded this company,
right? Not
only president, but co-founded it in 1994 with the help of your partner, Walt Townes. Before Retail Lockbox, you were a senior sales executive with Unisys Corporation, which was an international provider of computer and system solutions. Are they still around?
They are. They are. Much different now than they were before, but yeah, still around.
Yeah. And then you also serve on numerous boards, such as Boise Cascade, Washington Trust Bank, McKinstry, Pearson Packaging, University of Washington Consulting and Business Center, right?
Consulting Business Development Center, yeah.
Business and Development Center,
at the Foster School, yeah.
Yeah, why, I didn't prep you for this, but why was it important for you to be involved in boards?
As you get a little bit later in your career and you have a lot of experiences, you become valuable to other folks as they're running their businesses. And so also thinking about, what are you going to do next? And so board work, when you're helping people run billion-dollar businesses, it's something that I'm interested in, exciting. And if you get asked to do it, sure, take advantage of the opportunity.
Definitely. So I mentioned you co-founded this in 1994. Kind of how did you decide to do this or fall into this, and how did you meet Walt, and
Sure.
and then also kind of why stay for this long?
Sure. So Walt and I have known each other since I was 11 and he was 9.
Oh my gosh.
We met each other playing tennis in a tennis tournament, and so we became fast friends, doubles partners, and played tennis together through high school. Then I went on to the University of Washington, graduated in the business school there. Walt was at the University of Washington as well. And then I went to work for Unisys, as you stated earlier. Unisys was a mainframe computer company. So we're in a big office. So you would have, we would sell machines that would fill out this room versus today where you have like a phone that does the same or more than those computers. And I had a major accounts territory here in Seattle. So really up and down I-5, lots of sort of big companies, Nintendo, Costco, AAA, Seattle Times, big companies like that. But also we sold as a niche market remittance processing equipment. So those companies I just named also had high volume remittance processing needs. Also someone like an Airport Express, which is now DHL, but they were getting tens of thousands of payments coming in each day. Unisys as well as NCR both processed about half the check payments in the world on a daily basis. And so one of my niche markets was selling that check processing equipment, hardware, software, and services. Okay. And so after sort of going through a couple of sales cycles, which is about 5 years in the mainframe or the large, or we call it big iron business, people depreciate that equipment and then look to buy again. And also their maintenance goes up on that equipment. So had an opportunity to really think about it, sell it quite a bit, and then just figured there was a market for an independent provider of services. Because no matter how much equipment I sold to a company, they would basically, think of it as a station. The mail comes in the morning, it's going to go through that station, this equipment, and then it's extinguished. That equipment is sitting idle. My thinking was, why don't we use that equipment for 8 hours a day or 12 hours or 16 hours a day? And so that's really where the idea was born. And then I actually called Walt and said, hey, I got an idea. And he actually had some experience working for Seafirst Bank in their proof department, which is clearing checks. And obviously I had the technical background and the hardware background. And so we came together and I left Unisys and just started on our own with no customers.
Yeah. Clearly you made the right decision. I mean, look at you now. That's incredible. I love it. One more question for you before we get into the stories. I saw on your LinkedIn you were reposting a lot of stuff from the Black Business Warehouse. And then I dug a little deeper and I saw that you started that.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the Black Business Warehouse really was born out of the killing of George Floyd. A lot of business, I was on the Washington Roundtable, which is some of the largest businesses in the state of Washington. They came together and said, what should we do? Well, they basically started a coalition called Washington Employers for Racial Equity, and they made specific commitments to equity for Black Washingtonians. A lot of those commitments were really around hiring Black people and buying from Black firms. And so a lot of the CEOs would come to me and say, well, I can't find Black people and I can't find Black firms to buy from. And I would say, well, maybe you're not looking hard enough. Right. But those commitments, when you're talking about major business enterprises, your Microsofts, your Boeings, your Costco's, your large companies, how is a small, medium-sized Black business going to contract with a large company like that? Or how are you going to get a funnel of Black talent to those organizations? And so the Black Business Warehouse is designed to answer that question, right? To actually represent Black people and Black businesses through and to these major business enterprises, and not just sort of in a philanthropic way, but in a business sense. Right. So we started a business around being able to help Black businesses connect and contract, not just pull them off a list, but actually all the way through the contracting. So think of us as a manufacturer's rep or a consulting house that's focused on Black businesses, and those Black businesses taking them to major business enterprises. And then shortly after that, about a year after that, we started a talent agency. So basically, again, taking Black people and then providing them to these businesses as employees.
Wow. I think that's incredible because it's tangible ways that you're actually helping people and not just words, and more important now than ever.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to get into our stories. We are going to talk about a new sports bar coming by Climate Pledge, the ebook industry, and some changes that we're seeing over there. Google made its largest acquisition that it ever has. And lastly, we'll talk about a company called Remitly. So here we go. First one is a new sports bar. So it's going to be a two-story. It already opened. It is a two-story sports bar across from Climate Pledge Arena. It's called Tom's Watch Bar. And it's a Colorado-based company, but this is their 15th location. And not only are they opening this one, they're opening where Quality Athletics used to be, the Burbs Burgers. That's going to be another Tom's Watch Bar. They said they want to cater to both male and female fans. And a little background on that space, it was an old building, like over 100-year-old building. And it was one story. It's owned by the city of Seattle. The co-founders of Evergreen, so that salad and wrap place, came in and they wanted to renovate it, change it, etc. I couldn't tell exactly when Tom's Watch Bar came in from the Evergreens people, but they came in and obviously now it's open. So anything you want to add to that story that stuck out to you?
I just think all these sports teams are looking to grow fan base. Part of that fan base is what you can do around the stadium. Sometimes you can't get into the stadium, but you want to be close. Mm-hmm. And so, being able to watch big screen TVs, have a drink, have some food, cheer for your team. Yeah. That's
smart for sure.
A big part of it. So
it reminds me, I was at a bar, I was trying to get tickets to, I can't even remember the concert at the time, but I was like, I don't know, I'm sure there's going to be people like selling tickets outside the arena. Let's just go to a bar and then like walk around and see. No, they don't do that anymore.
It's all online.
They're paying on your payment processing.
Ticketmaster.
I was like walking around like, where's those little tickets that say like, or signs that say need tickets? So that didn't work out for me. But let's talk about location. So we are here, like I said, in Central District. Why did you choose this space for your office and what happened in the 2012 era?
Well, this is our third location. Our fourth location, actually. We started over in Aurora.
Okay.
In a little house that a friend of Walt's had, and they let us start our business there. But right on Aurora, a lot of people may not remember Dag's Drive-In or the big Pepsi sign that was on Aurora. So we were right there. Mm. And we were there for a year. Then we moved down into the South Lake Union area.
Okay.
So we were there for about 5 years in South Lake Union, sort of the west part of that. And then, obviously Paul Allen was buying up everything and it was changing. And so we actually got really fortunate and were able to buy a building about 3 or 4 blocks away from where we were. Mm. We were there for about a decade. Fortunately for us, that area was just getting redeveloped. So we were one lot of a block, and that building was getting sold, and there was a developer, and they wanted to buy our building. And, we're running a manufacturing facility here, really perfect payment, perfectly indexed image. So we weren't able to just pick up and move. Right. So we did a deal with them that gave us a couple of years to look for a place. And we looked all around Seattle. We needed parking. We had about 30 parking spots there. We needed parking. We needed, really space that we could grow into. And so we were just really fortunate to find this building and had adequate parking. And again, fortunate was sort of at the bottom of the market. We were able to get in, buy it, and then took a year to renovate it.
Awesome. Yeah, it's beautiful. We got nice little brick walls here. All right, we're going to move on to our next one, which is all about the ebook industry. So this was a long article in the Seattle Times, and it's kind of told through the lens of this guy, Andy Hunter, and he founded this place called bookshop.org in 2020. Now he's selling ebooks. That's kind of the big headline, is that he was selling, you could ship hardcover books, and now he's going to be selling ebooks. Some really interesting facts in this one is that ebooks are about 1 of every 6 books sold. And these independent indie bookstores aren't part of that ebook business, and he wants to change that. Now, why is that kind of a big deal? Well, because Amazon's sort of, I don't want to say monopoly, but Amazon controls 50% of the physical book market, and about 80% of the and about 80% of the ebook market. And that's a lot has to do with Kindle, because I don't have a Kindle. I didn't realize this, but you can only buy Amazon stuff on the Kindle, which makes sense. So he's wanting to launch this way where you can buy it on his website, but he also wants other indie bookstores to be able to sell on their website access to these ebooks. And he wants to launch his own version of the Kindle, a different e-reader. So he's talking about, Seattle's a big reading city. So he's not a Seattle based, I will say, but this kind of article talks about just books in general and all of that. But when we look at the industry as a whole, ebook revenue has gone down since 2014, which I'm a little surprised by. I would think that this is becoming more and more popular. But e-lending has increased. So when you go to like the library, you can rent an ebook and return it, which again, surprised. When you look at the physical books revenue, that to me looked like it went up a little bit and kind of down a little bit. Nothing dramatic, it didn't seem like there. The last thing I'll say, and I'll let you jump in with anything else you saw, but King County Library System is the second highest digital circulating library in the U.S. That's wild. So they're doing the most e-lending in the U.S. So yeah, overall, some of the bookstores seem skeptical that this will be helpful. They don't know if they can really compete with Amazon. But I think overall, might as well try. What are your thoughts or anything?
I think a couple themes there. First, it's really the digital versus physical world, and this huge race to get to digital. Now people are thinking, okay, it might be nice to actually have something in your hand, something to do. When we started our business, that was my thinking. I was selling, software and ideas, but I also wanted to have something you could touch. And so that check was something that you could touch, and that paper that you, that envelope. So I think it's the same is true with books. People want to be able to put a bookmark in, fold the page down, highlight the book, and it's different than holding an e-reader in your hand. So I think that's an important way to think about it. The other thing is I think people are also thinking about local, especially in the world that we live in today. A lot of people, and we'll sort of go back to the Black Business Warehouse, a lot of people have moved back their commitments from diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so the question is, are you going to support those folks who don't support your community, who've moved away from supporting, either they've been scared away from it or they didn't believe in the first place? So, I think you have to vote with your dollars. And typically, if you're, in a local community, going to the store, I mean, more people said malls were dead. Malls are not dead. Tons of people are going to malls and buying things. And tons of people are going to bookstores and buying books and reading those books. My wife's in a book club. She has a Kindle, but she also would prefer a lot of times to have that book in her hand and be able to read that book. So I think it's important, though. I think it's the most important thing I think about it is, are you going to go with, sort of a behemoth who is not necessarily, or in this case, not thinking about their community and the people that actually support them, right? $1.6 trillion are spent by Black Americans each year. Oh. Right? 1.6 trillion. So that's a lot of money. And the fact that they're going to walk away from that commitment. So should Black Americans should we be buying stuff on Amazon?
Yeah, I think it's an important thing to think about. I think this is probably a good time for this move I think a lot of people are wanting to support small businesses, local businesses. I think that's smart. So when this guy is doing his, bookshop.org, he's taking online payments. And what, I guess for you, when you're working with some of these merchants or getting them on board, what's some common mistakes that you see merchants doing, whether that's related to security or process or what have you?
Well, I think when you're online merchant, in this case, you're putting something in a shopping cart. You might be putting multiple things in that shopping cart, and then you're buying from that shopping cart. Sort of different from our business where you have a discrete bill that you're paying, and typically at the water district or utility or health club or hospital that you're paying. That's like it's a one-to-one. I'm paying a bill. Sometimes you can pay what we call multiples. So you're paying for your wife and yourself. In this case, it's you're putting things in a shopping cart, and you just have to make sure that you've got security around what you're doing. There's lots of opportunities around really a point of sale system that you have, and then how that point of sale system ties to your inventory, how that point of sale system ties to the way that you advertise. So I think a lot of folks don't think about that, how it's going to integrate with their website, if their website is a catalog that they're buying from. So there's a lot more that goes into it than just, hey, I'm going to click the button, do the payment page, put in my name, address, email, and then, my either credit card or banking information to make that payment.
When you're dealing with your clients, so when we are talking about like paying a bill online, what are some things, like why does Retail Lockbox stand out? What's different about yours, do you think? Or what kind of conversations are you having with these clients?
Sure. So first of all, what we try to do is if someone has a paper-based process with us, a paper-based lockbox, we're also trying to get them to do a electronic lockbox with us. And so that means the information that we're capturing about who's paying that bill, we can integrate also with the paper-based. So there's multiple streams that can come in together and be integrated when we upload those accounts receivable records. So that's important. The second thing is really ease, right? How easy is it to use that website? So a lot of times you might get this big system, these big companies, but it's super hard to navigate. Is the system you're using, is it mobile first? Meaning, is it designed to be on your phone and then adapts to whatever kind of phone you have, whether it's an iPhone or Android or whatever you have? Is it adapting to that, or is it adapting to the tablet? So that's really important. And then ultimately security is unbelievably important in our business, or any business. I mean, you're being attacked every moment of the day. And so do you have those defenses, those moats around your business that really allow you to defend?
Yeah, well, perfect transition into our next story, which is that Google is going to acquire a cybersecurity company called Wiz. They are going to pay $32 billion for this transaction. And it's the biggest exit for a venture-backed company. And the previous one was a $19 billion acquisition when Meta paid that for WhatsApp. What was interesting about this deal is that Google offered $23 billion and Wiz said no last year. And so then Google came back and said, okay, how about $32 billion? And they said, okay. Google basically wants to compete against AWS and Microsoft when it comes to cybersecurity. I didn't realize that Google has a much lower revenue than AWS and Microsoft currently. A little bit about Wiz. It was co-founded by 4 guys in January of 2020. Can you imagine creating something in 2020 and then 5 years later selling it for $32 billion?
$32 billion, yeah.
And then
they're in the right industry.
I know. Before that, they made another company, I don't know, Adalem, and they sold that to Microsoft in 2015. I don't know how much, but probably a lot. Some of the articles were saying this big exit is going to attract more funding for other cybersecurity startups. And this is just the beginning, especially with some of this AI stuff happening. So I wanted to bring this article in, not only because it's a big story, but also to talk about cybersecurity and especially with what you deal with. So I guess talk to me about what you do to ensure payments are secure, and kind of, you said you just had a call about security today. So what goes on in your world with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's almost every day, all the time. First of all, cybersecurity is at the forefront of every business owner, every corporation's mind about how you protect your assets, your IP, your customer information. So that's number one. In this case, I don't know the transaction specifically and the people involved, but you're typically buying technology, but you're also buying the people are behind that technology. And so if Google was behind, they're looking to jumpstart what they couldn't do internally. Mm-hmm. So they're willing to pay that premium to get to the revenue streams around cloud computing. Microsoft, their security is sort of ubiquitous around their Office suite and their Defender, and so it's all encompassing. AWS is more specific to their cloud and how they're protecting their cloud versus, in general. And I think this will probably be somewhere in between where they're looking to integrate the security protocols and the talent that this company has.
Have you had to deal with any kind of breach of security? Or because you were saying this happens all the time, people are trying to get the payment information, credit card information, and things like that.
Well, I'm gonna knock on wood.
Yeah,
because we have not. Certainly, again, we've put that at the forefront of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Firewalls, your email, security, your endpoint security, your social engineering that happens. We do a lot of work with our team about, okay, here are phishing emails that come in. Mm-hmm. We test them all the time. Yeah, I just think there's so many facets to security. We've outsourced a lot of that as well because, a company our size can't have every discipline of security. Sure. So we've outsourced that. And then we're looking for the best of breed in software and hardware combinations that can help protect us.
And speaking of acquisition here, didn't you acquire a company recently in Houston, right?
Yeah. So we actually have, 3 companies that we run for. I run the Black Business Warehouse, but Retail Lockbox Inc., Retail Lockbox Merchant Services, which is our online company with our online brand called paystation.com. And then about 18 months ago, we bought a business in Houston, another lockbox business in Houston that basically does exactly the same thing that Retail Lockbox does, only in a different location, a different area of the country. Retail Lockbox, we cover about 17 states. In Houston was the 4th largest city in the country. There's 7 big states around Houston that there's a lot of opportunity. Plus Texas is just, huge, the 2nd largest state in the union. So the opportunity really to grow our business down there. Yeah, we acquired that business 18 months ago.
Congrats on that. That's an amazing achievement. Absolutely. Our last story is about Remitly. Like I said, admittedly, it's not a huge story, but I wanted to talk about international payment. And Remitly is a Seattle company. I don't know if everybody knows that. So a little bit about this one. Matt Oppenheimer, he was in Kenya and he was trying to send money back to his, I imagine, family and friends in the US, and he was having a hard time. So him and Josh Hugg and Shivas Gulati in 2011 create this company Remitly, and it's a way to send payments internationally. From my looking around, I think their competitors would be considered like PayPal or Zelle, but they're trying to make it easier and maybe with less fees. The story that came out is that Josh Hugg, he's one of the co-founders, he was previously the COO, and he stepped down last year. And then the article is saying that he's now stepping down from his role as vice chair on the board, which I thought was dramatic. And then I realized he's still staying on the board. He's just not vice chair anymore. So again, not a huge story, but I think Remitly is a cool company and it services 170 countries. So you can send money to 170 different countries, and it went public in 2021. So fun Seattle company. But let's talk about international payment. You were saying you only handle U.S. payments. Domestic payments. Was there a thought about maybe doing international? What do you think about what kind of rules and stuff?
So check processing is different if you're going internationally. So Canada has a different banking system. Mexico has a different banking system. We would get checks where people are writing checks in Canada and want to pay a bill in the States. But typically there's an exchange rate associated with that. And when you're check processing, you don't have the ability to say, here's the exchange rate for this item that we're depositing into your bank. We're depositing at face value of US funds. So that's the difference. And then Check 21 came about, which is taking a paper-based check and making it electronic and depositing it electronically with a digital image of the item, of the check. And so Check 21 is also a US-based standard that doesn't have the ability to be cross-border. So when we're processing 2 million check payments a month, we're doing it domestically. And then Check 21 really makes it easy for banks to clear checks. What used to take could take up to a week to clear because they were put on a plane, and if you were in Seattle and the bank was drawn in Connecticut, that's a way for people to have float. Today that float's gone, right? So
it is crazy. The whole, taking a picture of my check and then it's in my bank account in seconds. Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah.
Okay. My big question for you is help us all understand processing fees. Sure. I know when you go to the nail salon, it's cheaper if you pay by cash. You have this extra credit card fee. I did a lot of kind of fundraising, whatever, through PayPal, and they take a processing fee. And then when I was paying my rent, it's through ACH, so through bank transfer. And all of a sudden they started adding a $2 fee. So who decides these fees? What's legal and what's not legal? Tell us more.
Yeah. First of all, Visa and MasterCard are the 8,000-pound gorilla in the room. They do monopolize the credit card industry. So the fees that you're paying typically are going to Visa and MasterCard. And Visa and MasterCard historically they were owned by the banks, but then were spun off into independent companies now that are run independently. So those fees that you have, so think if you're buying something for $100, you're going and buying your pet some pet food at the pet store, it's $100. Typically, the credit card fee is going to be about 3%. So you pay $3 for that. That credit card fee is going to get split up between a lot of middlemen between Visa and the merchant. In the current environment, I mean, basically Visa said, hey, it's easy to pay with your credit card. And so they have tried to displace cash as the major way of paying for things. And they've done a good job. And a lot of that was aided by sort of affinity things like I can get airline miles, or I can get cash back, or, discount, whatever. So the consumer thinks, hey, this is free. I'm going to get these airline miles. But really the merchant is paying. So that merchant is paying 3% for the privilege of using and taking Visa for Visa or MasterCard for that payment. So there's been a number of lawsuits because Visa and MasterCard sort of unregulated. They can charge whatever they want. And then there's also another network sort of behind that for ACH debit card processing. So there's really sort of two separate networks that are out there. That check processing, that debit card network is a lot less expensive to process. And a lot of those ultimately will go through the Federal Reserve. And those fees are a lot less expensive. So they have something called a convenience fee. And a convenience fee is, for a long time, Visa and MasterCard didn't want merchants to charge a convenience fee because they didn't want that to be a disincentive for people to use cards. Again, lawsuits came about saying, why should we have to pay these fees? We should be able to pass those on if someone wants the convenience of paying with a credit card. So basically now, it used to just be like state and local government, educational institutions, taxing authorities always had the ability to pass those fees on, because if I'm King County and you're a taxpayer, you have to pay the exact same rate as somebody else would pay. So I can't pay those fees. So now that's been extended to businesses though. So businesses can now say, hey, I don't want to pay that 3%. If you want to pay with credit card, you have to pay this 3% charge or surcharge convenience fee. It can be the whole fee or it can be part of the fee on the credit card side. And the same is true on an ACH or e-check payment. They can charge a convenience fee on that. The whole sort of independent software industry sort of glommed on to this convenience fee. So meaning someone like a Square who gave you a little device to clip to your phone, but really a point of sale for a business says, hey, swipe your card here. And oh, by the way, your credit card is captive, and here's what you're going to pay for credit card. They make all their money on that interchange, that merchant fee that they charge that the merchant is captured. So lots of point of sale systems. If you go to your health club, they're going to have a health clubs system. Those health club systems now, independent software organizations are giving away the software so they can get to the credit card fee because that pays for their service. So when you're saying, hey, I'm paying my rent, and before it was free, it's just a new revenue stream because that charge is probably very low for them to take.
But it's legal.
It's legal for sure.
That's just what they can do.
Yeah, for sure. And they're passing the cost of processing from them onto the consumer.
Yeah. I just wonder if there's a cap or a certain percentage. I'll have to look into that, if there's any kind of ruling of what they can or can't pass on to somebody.
Yeah, I think on the credit card side, there is. I think 5% is like the maximum that credit cards companies can charge, but they don't charge that because people aren't paying 5%. So they found that sweet spot, 2.75, 3%, whatever, that people are willing to pay, that merchants are willing to pay, and that people are willing to pay. And then on the e-check or ACH side, it's much lower for them to process.
Are you seeing more check pay? So like in the event world, a hotel, I have to put like $10,000, $20,000, they're large amounts, and it's a 3% additional charge. So when you're talking 3% of some of these big numbers, it's more worth it for me to send a check from my company. So are you seeing a lot more check payments because of these increased fees?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. So it's a lot less expensive to send a check. If I've got a $10,000 check and I got to pay 3%, that's $300, or I can send you a check for $1. Right? Yeah. So 100%. Yeah. So I think we're getting to a tipping point. For a long time, check volume was declining.
I know.
Right. And because Visa and MasterCard and people want you to go online and make the payment, but those payments are actually more expensive than a check payment, and certainly more expensive than cash, because cash is free.
Yeah.
And so now you're going to restaurants and they're saying, I'm going to give you a 5% or 10% discount for cash. Why? Because I don't want to pay those merchant fees.
I feel like the moral of this episode is we're going back to small physical bookstores. We're going back to old fashioned, and we're going back to checks at the grocery stores and cash and stuff.
You might not get the checks at the grocery store, but certainly you'll get to cash.
Yeah,
People paying cash for things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for clearing that up. All right, I'm going to wrap with one question for you, and I want to know if there was ever a point in your life where there was a mistake that you made that led to something better, or any kind of fork in the road where you were kind of better for it.
Yeah, I don't think it's a mistake. I mean, I think obviously people make mistakes all the time and they learn from those, and that's, you fall down, skin your knee, and get up and learn and do better. The big fork in the road for me, though, was working at Unisys Corporation. And I was one of the top salespeople in the company here in the Northwest, but in the entire company. And they came out and wanted to change the way that revenue came to them. So they were a hardware company, big iron, selling $1 million computer systems. I had a annual quota of $3 million. That means every year you got to go out and sell a bunch of stuff. They were looking to get into the services industry, consulting. And so they had incentives. And this was when nobody was doing this. I mean, this is, no one was doing services. No one was doing outsourcing. So I basically went to a large company here in the area, sold them on an outsourced facilities management order entry system where Unisys would provide all the hardware, would provide all the high-speed lines, would provide all of the software, build the application, and then allow their customers to order their product and then also be distributed from an automated warehouse. And it wasn't my thought, but Unisys valued that at about $20 million.
Okay.
So a $20 million deal. And it was a long sales process, a couple of years. And we had the highest level of people in Unisys, highest level in this corporation. We were coming down and we were getting ready to negotiate finally the contract. And this company is fairly litigious. So it was going to be a long, drawn-out contract negotiation. We had our general counsel coming in from Unisys to meet and sit with their general counsel. The week before that happened, I got a memo that said, here's a change to the commission plan. So for this kind of work, it used to be they would pay 30% on contract signing, 40% on delivery, and then 30% on acceptance.
Okay.
And so that was what we were looking at. And so a $20 million deal meant they were going to pay me on the day it got signed, a good sum of money. Mm-hmm. So they changed the commission plan to say, hey, we're not paying anything on signing now.
Okay.
And we're going to pay, as the customer pays. And so that situation caused me to change the way that I was thinking about it. I always wanted to run my own business. And that was just the impetus to say, hey, every year I've got this, growing quota, 3 million, probably next year it'll be 3.5 or 4. And on December 31st, January 1st, you start over again. So you could be the, the top person, but then you go back to zero and now you got to start all over again. And so I just felt like, hey, why don't I just, on January 1st, I just have whatever I sold last year and then I'll sell some more stuff this year, put it on top and keep growing it myself. So that was.
So it was that kind of that moment that you got the memo that you're just like, F you guys, I want to do my own thing?
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah.
You've put that much work into something and you've created this whole new thing.
Yeah.
This whole new category.
That was all you, yeah.
Yeah. And then to say, hey, and I didn't value the transaction. The company valued the transaction, which I'm sure was very, was close to what it was going to be. So that wasn't me. And they knew what was coming. It wasn't like, hey, I just brought this deal to you. We've been working on it. So to throw that back in your face and say, hey, we know you've done all this work, but now we're not going to pay you on it because it's the first one we've done and we don't, know.
Again, I mean, it sucks, but it sounds like it was that, like you said, final tipping point that you needed to start your own thing. I think a lot of founders have that where it's like something had to really piss them off or really, push them over the ledge a little bit. So it worked
Definitely
out.
a catalyst.
Well, thank you for sitting down with me, Craig, and thank you for hosting. I really appreciate it. This has been fun.
Excellent. Thank you. And I appreciate being on your podcast.
Yeah. This has been The Weekly with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.